The great historian David McCullough, who has won the Pulitzer for various of his biographies, such as John Adams, has been kept up at night. Now, it probably wouldn't come as any great surprise that 80-year-olds can't sleep all that well. But what keeps David McCullough up at night is the fact that history is no longer being taught in major universities. That is, it is not being considered as important for the general studies, or what we generally call the School of Liberal Arts. So what David McCullough is emphasizing is the importance of history, and it is exactly what we want to emphasize. That is, what is it that sets our faith apart? What is it that makes Christianity different from other religions? One of the keys to this, one of the ways in which this is true, is through history. And so I wanted to make sure that we walk through various and important ideas about the concept of history as it relates to the Christian view of life and things. Something I've been teaching my students for as many years as I can recall is this statement that I made up decades ago. If you begin to question a document's historicity, you begin to question its authenticity and ultimately its authority. If you don't have any standard for the answer to the question, who says, then the reality of it is questioned, and ultimately you go back to history and say, how can we really validate this thing? That's what we want to emphasize in these 3 videos for this particular week. And we want to begin with something that's important as it relates to a fuller context of how we understand history. I want to suggest that from a Christian vantage point, our view of history must be real, space-time, physical events. So real, physical, space-time events are really crucial words for us. And I wanted to begin with the concept of what is real. By what is real, I'm asking the question, how can we validate it? What makes something reliable? And so our first consideration when it comes to history, which is the documentation, as I've suggested in past videos, of historical documents. How do I know that these things are real? Well, in our day, and in any day, quite frankly, people have relied upon their 5 senses. Seeing, touch, tasting, all of those kinds of ideas. And we've represented them here by 5 straight lines. Those 5 senses, however, are not the fullness of the world. There is a 6th sense. We literally have 6 senses. And the other sense, of course, is that there is a supernatural world. The reality of this world and this life is shot through with the concept and context of reality that comes from another world. So when we think about the things that are real, we are thinking about, from a Christian vantage point, things that, as Paul well suggested in his defense before Agrippa, these things were not done in a corner. That is, we can go back and validate them, Agrippa. Read this in Acts chapter 26. Paul says these things weren't hidden. People didn't do it on the sly. There was no secret about them. They were right out front. Anybody could have talked about it. Anybody could have seen it. Anybody could have gone and talked to the eyewitnesses, which we'll talk about next. The real, physical, space-time events. How do we understand that? What is important about that from a Christian point of view? It's all about history.